Hello everyone. Today I'm going to discuss the topic of Autotelic Deep Reinforcement Learning Agents, and thus probably introducing to you the concept of Autotelic. So here it's a topic we've been working for a number of years with my team, and it's about trying to build agents that learn like children, which means able to invent their own objectives and pursue them, organize their own cognitive and sensory motor and social development, which is called autonomous development, and I'm going to illustrate how it requires diverse forms of advanced self-supervision. So first of all, before going into the detail of my talk, I would like to thank many of the PhD students, postdoc engineers, and senior colleagues with whom I've been working over the years, and in particular in this talk I will illustrate some work where they made central contributions. So first of all, infants are autotelic agents. What does it mean? It means that during exploratory play, which is a major part of the way they learn about the world, they do learn to invent and pursue their own problems, and they do learn to self-generate feedback for the problems and the goals that they imagine for themselves. And so it means that they put into place diverse forms of deep self-supervision. And this kind of self-invention of goals and pursuing of self-invented goals has been studied and showed in many works for several functionalities, ranging for solving problems with sparse rewards, learning in a sample-efficient manner world models, or discovering open-ended repertoires of skills. And so as we aim to give machine learning capabilities that share those capabilities with children, a challenge has been to reproduce the capacity of children to imagine and to learn to achieve a high diversity of problems and goals. If we look at children, they can imagine very concrete goals, like building a shape with Legos. They can add arbitrary constraints, like body figures in hopscotch. They can mix concrete and abstract features, like when aiming to pretend play pirates, where they need to build up a pirate boat and a telescope out of cardboard. And they can invent fully abstract goals, like wanting to write a story about time travel. So the long-term research program we're working on with my colleagues aims toward machines with this range of capabilities. And so a theoretical perspective that we've been taking is to see the child as a sense-making organism, as a little scientist that makes experiments to acquire good predictive models of the world, and even more importantly, good models enabling to control the world with their actions. And so they make basically experiments by first imagine a goal, which is often a learning goal. And so it means that on top of a standard learning architecture for discovering regularities about the world and build world models, there needs to be an adaptive meta-architecture that enables them to decide what goals to set at a given point in time, and thus what experiments to make and in which order to make those experiments and select those goals. And so it means that they will need to use several forms of self-supervision. So first of all, as they set a goal for themselves, when they try to achieve that goal and to learn how to improve toward that goal, they need to generate internally goal achievement errors. So that's the first form of self-supervision. And then as they set goals and they observe their goal achievement errors, they are going to monitor the number of internal measures to assess the interestingness of pursuing certain kinds of goals. And so this will be some form of self-supervision, which is then be given to an internal action selection system to sample goals in the future that have a higher likeliness to be interesting with respect to this intrinsic measure. And then as they learn to achieve those goals, they will discover regularities about the world, which will enable them to discover and update novel representations for novel kinds of goals. And so how to formalize this form of spontaneous exploration, this form of spontaneous generation of goals and the associated forms of self-supervision with machine learning tools. And so what are the main challenges? So first of all, one needs some kind of map of the space of goal. We need a space for embedding goals. So the first challenge is how to learn and grow such goal embedding spaces, especially as new discoveries are made. Then we need to associate meaning to these goals. In particular, an autonomous agent needs a way to self-evaluate how good it is at solving a goal. So this is the goal achievement function, which can be recurrent to account for time-extended goals. And another challenge is thus how to learn such a function. And so conceptually, here, a generalized goal is the pair associating a goal embedding and the goal achievement function. And if you add a skill to this specific, if you have a policy to this specification, then you get what we call a skill. Of course, when the agent samples a goal, it will try to learn how to achieve this goal with a goal condition policy and use the internal goal achievement function as a self-supervised learning signal. And last but not least, how to sample goals, especially in the real world with large spaces, many distractors, easy goals, difficult goals, so how to estimate the curriculum of learning about these goals. So a general framework we've been working on to approach these challenges is the IMJEP framework, Intrinsically Motivated Goal Exploration Processes framework. So it basically refers to all algorithms that look through the following steps. 1, observe the context. 2, sample a goal. 3, roll out the corresponding goal condition policy. And 4, observe the outcome and update the different kinds of internal models. And so algorithms in this family differ along several dimensions. Some are based on population-based techniques such as SAG-RIRC and quality diversity algorithms. Others rely on goal condition reinforcement learning such as RIG or goal GAN. Some use learned goal embedding such as RIG. Others use hand-defined like Curious. Some use learned goal achievement functions such as Imagine, I will describe this. Others use predefined ones like RIG. And some use goal sampling policies based on novelty search like SkewFit, and others use learning progress like Curious. So I'd like to discuss how various aspects of these works have addressed the challenges I listed. So in this first part, I will discuss the importance of goal sampling strategies, and in particular, how an agent can automate its goal sampling and form automatically a learning curriculum. So here we'll consider hand-defined goal embeddings and goal achievement function to focus on the sampling challenge and the automatic curriculum learning challenge. And I'll go back later on to these other challenges. So what's an interesting learning experiment for the brain? What's an interesting goal? Which means what signal to use to self-supervise the goal sampling process. So many ideas have been proposed in fields ranging from psychology to biology to cognitive modeling and AI, often independently. One idea is that an interesting goal is one which leads to the experience of high novelty or prediction errors or control errors. But well, in the real world, this is not going to work at all. This will lead a robot, for example, to spend its whole day staring through the window, making movements with its arms and trying to predict how the color of cars passing by change as a function of its movements. So it's something that we've called many years ago the white noise problem or the noisy TV problem. Among other ideas, I will now explain one that we've developed and studied a lot, initially inspired from the work of Varela and Maturana in biology, around the concept of empirical learning progress. And this has both been very robust to guide robot learning in the real world and to account for developmental trajectories observed in human infants. And so this idea is that the interestingness of a kind of experiment is proportional to empirical change in goal achievement errors. This change can be an improvement, but it can also be a decrease in competencies, which will enable to drive interest to parts of an environment that change or to skills that are being forgotten. And so we call this idea the learning progress hypothesis. So in practice, it also includes learning regress. So such a mechanism can automatically self-organize exploration along a curriculum. So to visualize how, let's imagine a situation on the top right where a robot is confronted with 4 kinds of goals characterized by different learning rates, as we see on the top graph. And so each curve shows the evolution of the errors in each type of goal if the learner would focus on practicing each of them. Then exploration driven by this principle will result in avoidance of goals that are too easy or too difficult to learn, and first focus on the activity with the fastest learning rates, and eventually, when it starts to reach a plateau, to switch to the second most promising learning situation, as we see on the lower right graph here. But so now here the problem is somewhat simplified since activities are pre-segmented and we can view in advance their learning profile. It's of course impossible to assume this for an autonomous agent in the real world. So beyond this general idea, the real difficult question is how to implement it in higher dimensional bodies with mechanisms for progressively categorizing sensorimotor activities and estimating online the learning progress. And so how do we do this? Let's consider doing it with goal achievement experiments. So here in blue we have the space of goal parameters. Then there is a mechanism for progressively splitting this space into subregions. And in each of these subregions, the learner keeps track of the evolution of goal achievement errors and estimates the absolute value of the derivative of goal achievement errors in each of these regions. And this is what we call the empirical learning progress. Then this measure of learning progress is used to decide in which region to sample goals using a multi-arm bandit that uses learning progress as the utility. And so here, the bandit we use is typically something like the explo algorithm because it's a non-stationary bandit problem. And one actually tracks learning progress at different levels of the hierarchy, so at different resolution. But maybe at this point, it's only a detail. Okay, so let's study this idea in the context of a complex environment, such as the ones illustrated on the left with this simulated robot. So first, in this kind of setup, there can be different types of goals ranging from moving a gripper to a particular position to moving an object along a target trajectory or producing a sound with a certain frequency with object A. If the robot sample goals by sampling a random target value in all dimensions of all objects, it will entirely fail to learn anything. First of all, because some of the objects can be uncontrollable, like a randomly moving cat in the scene, but also because most random combination of target objects features are impossible. So for example, trying to move 3 large objects in the air with one hand. Also, a sampling strategy aiming to explore novel or uncertain goals will completely fail because of these forms of distractors. And so to address this, one needs disentangled goal representation, which means the ability to consider goals that are specifying only a target configuration of a subpart of the scene. And so one also needs automated curriculum learning for sampling goals that are neither too easy nor too difficult. And so this is what we've been studying in the Curious system, which considers a modular representation of goal with the notion of goal types and goal values. So for example, here a goal can typically be moved cube number 3 to position X, Y, while ignoring everything else in the scene. And then goal sampling is made hierarchically using absolute learning progress to sample first goal types and then to sample goal values. Okay, so let's see the good properties of such a goal sampling strategy based on the absolute learning progress. So on the left, we see the curves of competence measures of 4 goal types. In the middle, we see curves measuring the absolute value of their derivative, which is the learning progress. And this is used to decide the probabilities to sample each type of goal as shown on the right. And we first see a form of automatic curriculum learning emerging. The easy type in blue is learn fast, as we see on the left, initially leaning to high learning progress, as we see in the middle, until it reaches a plateau. And at this point, the agent automatically shifts to the second easiest but not yet learned goal type, the red one, and so on. But then we see on the green curve that after mastering this goal type and shifting focus on exploring goal type number 4, the competence goes down. And this is due here to catastrophic forgetting, because we are using a neural network that's training on several goals, and this can happen. But because the measure of interestingness is the absolute value of the learning progress, it includes learning regress. And thus, we see the agent go back exploring this goal type, ending up dealing with the catastrophic forgetting problem. Okay, so this is what's happening with models in machine learning, but actually this is forming a hypothesis of the ways humans shall also self-organize their learning curriculum and how they select the learning problem they might work on. And we've tested the theoretical hypothesis recently on a human experiment where we gave human subjects several learning tasks they could freely choose. And here these were classification tasks. They had to learn which food were preferred by different families of monsters, and in each family, depending on the particular shape of the monster, they prefer certain kinds of food. And there were easy families to learn, intermediate difficulty families to learn, and families which had random food preferences impossible to learn. And so we collected the self-organized curriculum generated by several hundred humans, and then we tried to infer the utility function that they were using to organize their learning curriculum, and we were able to show that the utility function that best explain the behavior of human indeed contain a component assessing the learning progress. So basically it was a proof that, an evidence that humans use learning progress to organize their curriculum of learning when they are free to choose their learning progress. Okay, let's come back to machine learning. And now let's consider how to learn a goal embedding space. So for example, in the case of robots perceiving raw images. So one natural approach has been to train a generative model such as a VAE to learn an embedding of images, and to sample goals in that embedding. And so this was made in RIG with uniform sampling in the prior, or with UGL or SkewFit, where goals are sampled on the frontier of the known distribution, implementing a form of novelty search. The advantage is that it enables much more autonomy as compared to the systems before, yet these systems were not robust to environment with distractors, or simply large environments with multiple objects, and had a predefined goal achievement function, a simple distance in the VAE embedding. So how to go beyond these limits? So to address robustness to distractors and enable more advanced curriculum learning, the GrimJet system used a learning progress-based bandit where the arms are unsupervisedly learned clusters in the learned embedding, for example, using Gaussian mixture models. And then to address robustness to the presence of multiple objects, the Muggle algorithm has been used based on training beta VAEs to learn disentangled embeddings, and then clustering of groups of dimensions, of latent dimensions corresponding to different objects, and then learning progress-based sampling of goals that characterized individual objects. And then to address the issue of learning the goal achievement function, one idea explored by a series of papers has been to learn the action distance. So a challenge with using a predefined function like L2 distance in the VAE embedding is that similar images are not always a good sign that an image goal is close to be reached, and so it can be a deceptive reward. So a better measure that can be learned through exploration is to predict the average number of actions that need to be taken to reach a goal. But yet, one limit of this approach is that it does not generalize easily to out-of-distribution goals, which should be the most interesting kind. And so let me go now to part 3 of my talk, language as a tool for imagining and sampling abstract and out-of-distribution goals to address the limits of those previous approaches. And so in the approaches I described so far, spaces in which agents could sample goals also corresponding to very concrete goals, such as producing a precise movement or a visual pattern. Furthermore, when using generative models to sample goals like VAEs, even in the case of incentive towards novel goals, the sampling happens within the distribution of known goals. But to power a creative exploration, however, agents would need to generate novel, creative, and abstract goals that are out of distribution of things already seen. And in this process, children use language as a creative tool. So Pierre-Yves first discovered that children use egocentric speech to narrate their ongoing activities, and later Vygotsky showed that they used it to generate goals and plans to solve them. And language is indeed compositional by nature. It can push the limits of the known towards the unknown, as Chomsky illustrated with the extravagant construction colorless green ideas slip furiously. So the compositionality of language can thus be used to generate out-of-distribution goals to imagine new goals from known ones. So for example, if I know what a cat and a bus are, then I can easily compose the two to generate a new concept, a cat bus, and I can easily picture what it would look like in my mind. So inspired by this, we recently introduced the imaging system, which is an intrinsically motivated learning architecture that leverages natural language interactions with a social partner to explore procedurally generated scenes and interact with objects. And so in the first phase, here on the left, Imagine discovers meaningful environment interactions through its own exploration and gets descriptions provided by a social partner. And as it discovered potential goals, the agent learns to represent them by jointly training a language encoder, mapping language to goal embeddings, and a language condition reward function. And then in the second phase, the agent starts imagining goals by composing known ones. It can now train autonomously on these goals via the language condition reward function learned in the first phase. So let's see this in more details. Here we have an environment that is procedurally generated at each episode with many types of objects that vary in color, in shapes, and have various types of compositional dynamics. It's a bit like Minecraft, but maybe a bit less nice visually, but still quite compositional. So for example, animals can be grown if one brings them food or water, but plants can only be grown with water. So an agent initially tries random things, and there is a social peer providing linguistic description of what he did in an episode. And so the agent is going to learn the meaning of these descriptions and reuse them as its own goals in the next episodes. And so here, in line with the embed framework, the meaning of sentences will be learned and encoded in two ways. First, the agent will learn a goal achievement function conditioned by learned embedding of goal sentences. And so the signals for training this goal achievement function come from the social peer. And then the goal achievement function is used by the agent internally to self-supervise the training of policies, conditions, and language goals. And so in addition, the learned goal achievement function is also very useful to achieve hindsight learning for relabeling behavioral trajectories with the language goal they achieve, because indeed the social peer does not always provide full description of what was done. So it's useful to complete the description given by the social peer. And so now comes the most interesting part. After the first phase, there is now an autonomous exploration phase in which the social peer does not speak anymore. So here the agent continues to sample goals as sentences already uttered by the social peer and training on them. But most importantly, the agent also invents new out-of-distribution goals by recombining words to form new sentences, modeling their meaning using the learned goal achievement function, and using this internal reward function to train the policy to achieve good out-of-distribution goals. But for this general idea to work, there are two big challenges. First, how to imagine new sentences that have a sufficient probability to be meaningful or at least useful to make some discoveries. So we here leverage the construction grammar framework used to model child language development with pattern imitation and discovery of word equivalent classes, as is illustrated by the colors on the left. And the second challenge is how can the goal achievement function generalize to out-of-distribution? This is absolutely key because the generalization of the goal achievement function will enable the agent to self-supervise and train the policy. And so to enable such generalization abilities, we've used a neural architecture that combines three things. The first thing is affordance-based representations. Basically, inputs include states of the body and object and their change in an episode. The second ingredient is attention, to filter information of sentences only relevant to the language goal. And finally, deep sets, which combine with affordance-based representation, constitute a variation of a relation network, which is itself a special kind of graph neural network. And so to evaluate such mechanisms for out-of-distribution language goal imagination and the associated modular neural architectures, we've basically made a series of experiments studying the capacity of the agent to achieve test goal from a test set of sentences that were never uttered by the social peer. So we've also compared the properties of various goal imagination techniques, showing the robustness of the approach to many kinds of goal imagination, even some that are not very advanced, quite dumb goal imagination approach are still very useful, enabling the agent to self-train and self-supervise to generalize to new sentences without the presence of the social peer. We have also studied in details how it can boost differentially various kinds of linguistic generalization. So you can see the details in the paper we published at NeurIPS last year. And centrally, we've also used metrics of exploration showing how this form of goal imagination enables creative discoveries. And we finally some fun qualitative analysis, like seeing an agent imagine the goal of growing a plant that is a goal never uttered by the social peer, and then first trying to do it by giving food to the plant because its policy generalizes the strategy for growing animals. But then the learned goal achievement function sees it does not work and self-supervises to adapt to the right behavior, which is bringing water to the plant. Okay, so takeaways. So I spoke of many things, but maybe what you shall keep in mind from this talk is, first of all, the concept of autotelic deep reinforcement learning agents, which mean that, first of all, agents not only sample their own goal, but they learn to represent and they learn to invent out-of-distribution goals to pursue. Then they self-supervise intrinsic rewards that measure interestingness of the goal they pursue to decide whether they continue which goals to samples, and forming automated curriculum learning. And they also learn to generate their own feedback for achieving these goals, potentially initially by interacting with the social peer using language, and then internalizing language to self-supervise. And then I've shown that RMGEPS is a very useful algorithmic framework to develop and study autotelic agents. And finally, I emphasize again the role of language as a tool to imagine abstract out-of-distribution goals with learned goal embeddings and goal achievement function, and which I believe is paving the way towards open-ended creative exploration, and even more generally to a family of agents which are both autotelic and also Vygotskian, in the sense that, like Vygotsky proposed in cognitive sciences, like children, they are autonomously exploring the world by using cognitive tools that were initially acquired through social interaction, such as language. Thank you very much, and let's hope for stimulating discussions.